once the tech.
Great.
Allison Winn Scotch, I'm so thrilled to have you here. I am, as you know, a longtime fan. You are the New York Times bestselling author of 8 published novels, with a 9th coming out November 1st from Berkeley called The Rewind. Yes? You look puzzled.
Yeah, I would not remember if this were my 9th or 10th. I'm so, yes, but I think that sounds right.
Congratulations and welcome. Thank you for coming on and letting me talk to you a little bit about your writing journey.
Yeah.
I usually go all the way back to the beginning, but before I do that, I would love to talk about something you're doing right now, your Adopt a Library program, because I don't want to forget to do that.
Thank you for asking. Yes.
Hell, I can describe it, but you'll do it better. So
Sure. So over the summer, a librarian down south emailed me and said she didn't have a budget for my books. Would I be willing to send some of my books down? And I said, of course, no problem. And then I asked her, since authors are sent so many free copies of books, and we buy a lot of books and read them once and put them on our shelves. In fact, we have a lot of gifted books right here. I asked her if it would be helpful if I sent down other people's books as well, and she was very appreciative. And then I said, well, I know so many authors, could I expand this? Do you have other branches in your area who could benefit from this as well? And so she put me in touch with some other public libraries, and then I thought, well, why don't I see how big we could take this? And so I ended up putting out a call on social media, and we got about 50 to 60 public and school libraries, a few nonprofits, and people have since just been sending in boxes of books to these places, and it's been super gratifying. You know, I said to my husband, and like, as I'm working on my next book, like, I honestly just want to do this for my career. Like, you know, there's obviously, and we'll get into all this, the gratifying aspect of being a creative and writing and telling these stories. But at this moment in time in our world, I feel very fulfilled by doing something so small. It literally is like 20 minutes of your day. You go to your bookshelf, you package up some books, you go to the post office, you send it media mail, and it's like $10 to mail 25 books to these in need and underfunded. You know, I was looking for smaller libraries, more remote towns or rural towns. And, you know, people have been getting thank you notes and real deep gratitude from something that is really just an afterthought for many of us, having all these spare copies on our shelves, the availability or the ability to just go to a store and buy a book. A lot of us don't even think of it, but a lot of people are not in that position. So, yeah, so I keep a running spreadsheet, and I am still asking for people to donate books, and I'm hoping to make it just an ongoing project.
that was my next question. If people want to participate, is there a place where they can look at your spreadsheet or sign up?
Yeah, so I'm mostly tracking it on Instagram. It's just sort of the easiest way. You know, it seems like the best social media platform for it. Facebook maybe would be, I'm just not on Facebook all that often. And Twitter, it's not the right place. So if you go to my Instagram, which is ASWin, there's a highlight saved to it. And I do have a Google Docs what's interesting is people seem intimidated by the Google Doc, which I understand because it took me a long time and both of my children to explain it to me. So some people, you can just look in the Google Doc and sign up there. But if it's easier, people can just message me and they'll be like, oh, I have 10 middle grade books. Where can I send it? And I'll send them an address and off they go. So awesome. In fact, I actually have a bunch more that I'm going to send out as soon as I get some boxes in from Amazon to repurpose them and send them back out. So it's just been, I don't know, the world is hard right now, and it's like such a small thing. I tried to make it nominally, expensive for people, so they didn't have to feel like I was asking much of them. It's really just getting to the post office and sending stuff. So
it's lovely, especially right now with a lot of libraries struggling, librarians struggling.
That's how I feel. It's, for those of us who are in the fortunate position to have full bookshelves and to understand the power of a book that a child may see themselves represented in, or an adult may need just for a connection. you know, it's just an easy, it's very gratifying. So, and we've
Thanks.
sent out something like over 1,200 books so far,
That's
which is
amazing.
like
Well,
insane.
good. Hopefully we'll get a few more.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to
Thank
talk
you,
about
Dr.
your books, though, your career, which you did not actually set out to be a writer. I was reading a little bit about your background, and you have a history major, cum laude, right?
Yeah.
And a marketing minor. So did you write as a kid? Did you want to be a writer? Was this something you loved? And if so, why were those your majors?
So my mother was a teacher who always insisted that we read a lot. My brother was a much bigger reader than I was. And she and I were talking about it recently. And she said, you know, it's funny, like of the two of you, I always would have thought he would have been the writer, but I had a really active imagination. And I mean, I've said this before, if I weren't a writer in an, you know, ideal world, I probably would be an actress, just because like a lot of writers, we get lost in our heads a lot. So, I think maybe because of that imaginative element, I was a good writer. And in high school, I was encouraged by one particular English teacher to take it more seriously. And then in college, I landed a column in my school paper, which was very coveted. And I didn't tell anybody I applied because I was like, there's no way I'm going to get it. And then I did, and it was a bi-monthly column. And it was really the first time I felt like validated, other than in high school English, like, oh, well, maybe this could be something. And to the point about my majors, it didn't seem like a profitable, like a feasible, you know, I graduated in the like mid 90s when the internet was not a thing. Like you couldn't just like Google how to find an agent. I mean,
Right.
you're about my age, it's just seemed preposterous. So, but I graduated from the honors history program, and we had to write a 100-page thesis, which was
Oh,
really good practice. You know, when you're 21 years old, that's a Herculean paper or task. So between the op-ed column that I got and the thesis, it seemed like I could do it. I just didn't know how to do it. So I graduated from college. I got a job in PR, which I just hated. And I mean, this is a very long and winding story, which is actually a great segue into my career. But one thing led to another. I started writing for magazines. I got hired to ghostwrite a book, and it just sort of snowballed, where I was writing a lot of ad copy, freelance, like web copy, and then increasingly writing for magazines. And I just, after so many years, magazines at the time had a lot of really frantic deadlines. Like it was exhausting work, just like 6 deadlines a week. These women's magazines, you turn it around really quickly, which was great preparation for what I do now, but it was just sort of untenable for me once I had kids. And so I segued to fiction. It took me 4 years to write a book that did not sell, which is a like a really good lesson for aspiring writers. It got me an agent, but then I had to write another book, which she could not sell, and told me that I should either revise the first manuscript or start over again. Because she said, and I've written about this before, that taking it out would do my career more harm than good. And so I fired her, and I found my current agent, and we had 4 offers on it at an auction. And that was my debut novel. And so
on the
that's
same one that would have done you more harm than good, that one.
correct.
Okay, you
Correct.
just
And I
gave me
don't
so
even,
much great stuff. So let me just
yeah,
dig in a
exactly.
couple of
Like there's so
places.
much.
No, this is good. Like this is all the stuff.
Oh my God,
You know,
love
it's not a straight
writers.
path.
Yeah, no.
So that's the part I want to kind of dig in on. So first of all, the fact, I mean, you sort of glossed over doing the writing for freelance magazines, but quite honestly, you were writing for some of the biggest magazines out there.
I
That's
was.
huge. How did that happen?
So as I said, I ghost wrote a book for The Knot, the wedding site.
And was
And
that when you were still in PR? That was your
that
shift
was
in?
like shortly thereafter, when I was writing this web copy and doing a lot of, a friend of mine had launched a website. Again, I was trying not to get into the minutia.
I want the minutia.
Yeah, I
want
could
the
talk about this
minutia.
stuff, like people's eyes might be glazing over. So a friend of mine was launching a web, this was like at the .com craze, launching a website. I was in LA, moved back to help her. And when we were done, I got hired by a lot of our clients who were working on the website with us. So I was able to sort of support myself. And then I got hired to ghostwrite this book. And then from there, because it was The Knot, I landed my first editorial at Brides magazine. So it was sort of a natural extension of my knowledge set at the time. And then once I got Brides, I started writing a lot for Cooking Light. And then once I started writing a lot for Cooking Light, I went to Self and Women's Health and Men's Health and all, Glamour, all those. It's, for better or worse, like, you have to build that portfolio, but once you built it, it becomes so much easier. And also at the time, again, magazines have changed so much. So I feel like we're sort of talking about something archaic at this point, but you learn the vernacular, you built your network, and it just, like many things, breaking in was maybe the hardest. And then also walking away was a little challenging, just because it was, I had worked really hard to get where I was, and my phone was ringing instead of me pitching people. But it just, as I said, the pace at that time in the magazine world was really frantic, and you would get a call late at night to turn something around the next day. And once I had little kids, it was just, it wasn't what I wanted for myself. So,
How long had you been doing it at that point?
Probably 5 years or so. And I also felt like, which doesn't maybe sound long in the scheme of a career, but a lot of these articles, they were like the how to, have better skin, how to have a better sex life, whatever. There are only so many like how-to articles you could write before, like, you didn't even need to pick up the phone and call an expert, even though you did. Like, you felt like you could write them yourself. So I was lucky enough. I've always had a big interest in pop culture to segue mostly to celebrity profiles, which I loved and would still do if many of these magazines were still around, which they're not anymore. So that was fun and kept me busy in downtime between novels. But it was a really valuable lesson for what came next in terms of deadlines, in terms of, well, you have been my editor, in terms of taking editorial feedback with no ego and making changes, working towards an end goal that everybody on your team or everybody on the editorial team at a magazine is working for as well. But it sort of reached its natural expiration point for me.
So when you were doing that, was that something you thought was going to be your career, or were you always eyeballing novels?
It's interesting. I, like a lot of people, had always said, keep in mind, I was like 30 years old. So when I say like always said, like now at this point, if you're 30, like go and reinvent yourself. There's no, there's no expiration date for that. But I had always thought I wanted to write a book. And like many people, I was like, yeah, I can write a book, but I hadn't. And as you know, and as plenty of aspiring writers know, not as an aspiring writer, as an editor, the book is only written once it's written. Like, you can say you want to write a book, but if the page is blank, the page is blank. So I was actually flipping through my alumni magazine, and an author named Sarah Dunn, who I have read all of her books. I've since met her. She's wonderful. Anyway, she had a little blurb in it saying, like, I think her second novel was coming out, and she was a couple of years ahead of me in college. And I just thought, oh my God, if like she's on her second novel and she's 30, sorry, I apologize. I closed my email and it just went off again. If she's doing it, why have I not? And so, and I'm sort of like that. I'm like, well,
Competitive.
I'm a little competitive. So that's what, again, like the magazine stuff was very fulfilling. And at the time when I broke in, it was my goal. But one thing I think you and I can certainly discuss is that your goals and priorities are allowed to change as you get older. And, as I was saying when in the intro, I don't know if I want to write novels forever. Maybe I want to go like salvage libraries. I don't know, but that's okay. And that's like, we should all reserve the right to pivot if we're not, if we feel like we want to try something else and we're in the position to, which I was,
Yeah.
fortunate at that time to be able to try something else.
So how old were you when you decided, okay, I'm going to try to write a novel? And were you doing it while you were freelancing, or did you just go chuck
I was,
it?
yeah, I was
Okay.
doing, no. I was not in that position to just be like, forget it. I'm not bringing in any money. I was married, so we were a dual income family, or
That
at the time,
helps.
we didn't even have children, but I do think that's important to acknowledge. I had a husband, so we had pooled our resources. I have a husband. I still have. Although COVID, I don't mean COVID, I mean living together, lockdown. But I was working on the novel. I was probably, I started in my late 20s. And as I said, it
Okay.
took me like 4 years to finish and it did not sell. But we sold that debut when my son was 1 and he just turned 18. So
Okay.
this was
And the
about,
debut was your second manuscript, right?
correct,
Okay.
exactly.
So
First
where's
pub-
that first one? What happened to it?
oh my God, I don't know. And I would die if I read it. Like,
Really? Because I was going to say it was obviously good enough. You said it got you an agent. Yeah.
yeah, it got me an agent. I think like a lot of first time writers, it was probably too autobiographical in some ways. What really took me so long to finish it, honestly, is I think the first half was sort of pulled from my life. And then when I had to divert into fiction, I just couldn't figure out how to do it, which is why in the future, I've never, other than, maybe emotionally pulled from my life, I've never set something up that is realistic to me, because I have a very hard time flipping that from, okay, well, this is what happened to me. Now what could be fictionalized? So, but I don't think it was probably that well written. There was probably a lot of exposition. I mean, as you know, and as I assume listeners know, the learning curve for this career is so steep. And PS, it never stops. The rewind, which is coming out, I mean, that was really arduous for me to write. So it's not just like you figure it out and then, oh, you're set. It is complex, every single manuscript that you write. So I think I probably just made a lot of stupid mistakes. And by the way, I never reread my debut, because I also, the Department of Lost and Found, that became my first book, because I still feel that way. Like,
About
oh,
that one, you
it's
mean?
like such a first time novel to me. So, and, but that's okay. It was my first novel. So
Yeah, you don't seem to get hung up on that. Like that first one that you were not particularly proud of, you don't seem that worried about. You just seem like you, and correct me if I'm wrong,
yeah,
you do the project you're working on, you let it have its life, and then you move forward.
I think that that's right. I think it is very difficult to make like public art, for lack of, like, that sounds really pretentious, but something public that you open yourself up to criticism and then leave yourself open to that criticism, because how do you then move forward? Because then if you're working on your next thing, you're thinking, well, so and so said this, so and so said that. And I will say, so my second book blew up unexpectedly, took the publisher by surprise.
This
We
was
got
time
really
of your life.
time in my life, yeah. So we got very lucky at the time. People Magazine was like a major driver of books, and it was in People and at the Today Show the same weekend, and so it hit the Times list. It was just one of those anomalies. Again, nobody was expecting it, and I will say, after that book, I did try to digest what people didn't like about it, and I went to write my third book, and it is the only book in my anthology, I guess, for lack of a better word, that I do not like, because I was hearing these critics like voices while I was writing, like some people didn't like that my character swore too much. Some people thought she was too unlikable. So I tried to fold all these things into the recipe of the book. And as a result, it required more edits than I've ever needed. It doesn't feel authentically like mine. I mean, some people still like it. Like, I'm not telling people, you know, like there's something wrong with you if you liked it, but listening to those voices, I learned the lesson that like you can't write to try to please your audience, because then for me at least, it becomes very difficult to please myself because I sort of know what I want to write. So so I have listened, like carried those criticisms forward with time in my life, and it just didn't serve me. So, you know, maybe that's something that comes with experience, or maybe that's just I'm not a very sensitive person. So maybe it's just me feeling like, well, if you have something not nice to say, like I don't really digest it. But I just, you know, it's a reason why people shouldn't read the reviews after a while. It's like, what's the purpose? I can't go back and rewrite the book. So, you know.
I think some writers, especially in a business that depends on hitting the market, especially now, you know, and giving people what they like, that's a hard thing to let go of. And you said you sort of instinctively do that. Do you have suggestions for authors on how to, you can write your heart, but you also
Yeah.
do to some degree have to write for your readers in some
Yeah,
ways?
I mean, I should say it's not that I don't write for readers. For example, my follow-up to The Rewind is another rom-com, and I was really struggling on this manuscript. And so I spent, in order to make sure it was where I wanted to be for readers, I spent weeks and weeks reading every rom-com I could. And, you know, normally I try to um, like if I read a rom-com, then I read historical fiction, then I'll read a thriller. Like I try to sort of, I'm in Gemini, like I have to keep myself at the game. But so I really understood the beats that it was hitting, the looks and the sexual tension and all of that. So it's not that I'm not trying to write for the audience, but I think that it is an extremely vulnerable thing to write 300 pages with your name on the spine. You know, sort of unlike a TV show or a movie, it's you out there. Like nobody's saying, and you're an editor, nobody's saying like, well, I mean, every once in a while, somebody will be like, her editor should have come in. But it's really, if people are going to criticize you, it's you, or the book, it's you. So,
But it feels like you, even if it's the book.
correct, exactly. I mean, it's your work, it's your words. So I just think that you're already in a vulnerable position. So what works for me may not work for another writer, but stop putting yourself, you don't need to continue to be raw as people start reading your book. Like I have a friend who always was always checking Goodreads, and she would call me, she'd be like, oh my God, people are so mean, or why do they tag me on Instagram, which is a whole other thing. Actually so rude, and that is the reader's fault, not the writer's fault. But you know, I have not looked at Goodreads in several months because I was getting upset. So I just don't allow myself. I go on and I will literally hold my hand over my profile to leave positive reviews for other writers. But I find myself ruminating over mean things that people say, and it doesn't serve me. It makes me second guess how I'm writing. You know, it makes me feel bad about a book that I'm proud of. And so, you know, I can't necessarily tell other people how to protect themselves, but I mean, look, it is a publicly exposed career, and it is not for everyone. I mean, that's the truth. When I wanted to be an actor, I remember having an acting coach saying, if you can do anything else, do that. And that's not how I necessarily feel for writers, but you do have to have a little bit of a thicker skin, and how you get yourself there, I'm not sure I can say, but for me, it's like, I feel like I delivered something good, and my editorial team is publishing it. So they must feel like it's pretty good. And if other people don't like it, I'm not, maybe this is 9 books in, maybe this is being in my 40s. I don't know. I'm not sure that I need to be responsible for their feelings about my book, other than I read them. I do read reviews initially, and I take for my next book, I take some of that feedback with me
Okay.
in a positive way. Like, I went and I digested every rom-com I could to make sure that it was what I wanted, but it was also what readers wanted. Am I making any sense?
Yeah. It sounds like what you do is focus more on the process than the
Yes.
product or the result.
I think that's right. I mean, and also I want to be proud of the product, and I love the rewind. And I can say very clearly, I didn't love my 3rd book. So, but maybe it was the process of getting to that end result of the 3rd book. It just felt so inauthentic. I was trying to write based on all this other noise instead of
Outside in instead of
correct.
inside out.
That's exactly right. I mean, you're an editor. You articulate exactly.
So how did it do? Did it do as well as the previous? It was a companion piece to Time of My Life, wasn't it?
Well, it was sort of a yin and yang, in that, like, Time of My Life, she went back in time, and this one she could see her future. It did okay. Not necessarily even related probably to the book. Time of My Life, there was a lot of behind the scenes stuff where my imprint was closing and my editor had left, not for the one that I want, which was the follow-up to Time of My Life. And I'll never know if it's because I didn't love the book and so readers felt that, or if it were causes totally outside of anything that I could control, which often happens with books. The longer I've been in this, and I think I want to, I hope that people hear this, what I'm saying, a book's worth should not be based on how many it sells. There are so many amazing books that do not sell a lot of copies,
or do not even get published. I've read
correct.
some brilliant manuscripts.
Correct. That's exactly right. And it is very hard for an author not to blame him or herself for a book's failures, or I should say sales failures. I don't mean failures, but what they are held accountable for from a publishing house. And I feel very strongly that if an author delivered a book that the editor and the publisher was happy with, that is all we should be responsible for. And if it doesn't sell well, I don't know what else an author could have or should have done, because we are not in the sales. I mean, unfortunately we are, but when I started out, all we had to do was write a book. So, I'm hesitant to say, like, well, did a book do well? Did it not do well? If it reached a few readers who were moved by it, plenty of authors can call that success. Yeah. So, and I don't.
You always feel that way, or is that something you got to?
No, I got to that. So my 4th book, there was a lot of drama around it. As I said, my imprint was closing. I was so happy there. I was at Shea Earhart. It was my dream imprint. I love Shea. I loved my team. I don't mean my team like pretentiously. I just mean everybody who worked it, and not like,
production team.
Correct. Exactly. Everybody who was involved there was wonderful, and Random House shuttered it. So I got poached by another big imprint, and
at Random,
at Simon and Schuster. At Penguin, and
before they were one, right?
Correct. Exactly. That's why I'm like, where it was.
Yeah.
I can't even remember. But I got paid a lot of money for it. I mean, full disclosure. I mean, they were buying out my contract, and before that book came out, my editor left. Sort of internal support collapsed. I mean, this was like maybe 2 months before the book came out. So really, at like a pivotal point when you need sales to be taking it out, it's whatever. It's no one's fault. But the book did not do well. I think it probably did the worst of my career. And I've been paid a lot. And as you know, or as listeners may know, you are measured by your advance. And if you, it's not that you have to earn out, because a lot of books don't, but you need to do well, particularly if you have been paid six figures. So after that, I really thought my career was over, and I was really pissed off about it, because I felt like, I mean, like I was bitter, like, because I felt like, what else could I have done? Like none of these factors, I was not responsible for any of these factors. People were thrilled about the book until they weren't. You know, I loved my editor. I'm not, she was allowed to, of course, move on, like no ill will. So I don't mean to point, I'm certainly not pointing fingers. I just mean it was like a sort of calamity of events that led to a book's failures, which I think a lot of authors have been in that position. You know, people came out at the start of once in 100-year pandemic and their books didn't sell. That's nobody's fault, but it sure feels, I don't know if I can say shitty on here, but
Yeah, say it a bunch.
yeah, it feels awful. So I, for a while, felt really shitty about myself. And then I got really angry, not at anybody, but just at the nature of blaming the author for things that she or he has absolutely no control over. So that's when I started to sort of reframe it for myself and think, well, I don't really understand why nobody is offering me a book deal after this, because I could not get hired. People wanted me to write under a pseudonym. People wanted me to, I don't know, I can't even remember all the different things that were coming my way. But I was like, I don't understand. Like people were so excited about this book. You know, editorially, everybody was on board, and due to a variety of circumstances, over which I had basically no control. Like we were supposed to be in People, which again still drove, and then Brad and Angelina got married, and then they like rejiggered the issue really quickly, and they cut all the books. Like, you know, everything that could have gone wrong did. So then I don't know, maybe this gets back to what we were talking about earlier. I just sort of refused to be blamed for things that I didn't feel I should be blamed for, which is difficult, because authors are blamed when a book doesn't do well. And I don't understand it. Like I don't, you know, 10 people at a publisher have had to approve the manuscript. So why are the authors held accountable? And maybe, you know, listen, I know why they are, you know, I mean, there are plenty of reasons, like maybe their writing doesn't resonate, blah, 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 blah. And it's a business thing. I don't mean to say like, I don't understand the business side of it, but since I'm speaking specifically to authors here, I just think, you know, you are allowed to let yourself off the hook. And if your book doesn't do as well as you expected, don't blame yourself. Like, I don't.
That sounds shockingly healthy.
Yeah, I mean.
But it does. Like, I think that's like, as you're saying this, even and I've been in this industry probably as long as you have, 30 years or so.
Yeah.
That's a revelation to me, what you're saying. Like, you're right. It goes through, we talk about the gatekeepers.
Really?
Well, the gatekeepers are the ones who said, yes, stamp it. It's good to go. I mean, it's great.
Yeah, like, I'm not.
Why is it on the author?
I have like positive relationships with every editor who has gone to greener pastures, and I support women. All my editors have been women, right? You know, moving up through the ranks. And genuinely, it's not that. It's just that, again, I delivered what you wanted. I am not the sales team. I am not PR. I am not marketing. And sometimes things just don't work. Like, it's like a recipe. Sometimes you try something and it just fails.
It's art.
Right. That's right. And it's okay. So I'm not saying like, you know, some authors couldn't have written a better book. I don't mean to like completely, you know, sort of point the finger elsewhere, other than to say though, almost, at least from my perspective as a writer, I don't know what goes on inside, you know, the halls of publishing houses. But I don't know why we are held accountable when our job is to write the book. And if we have written the book that everybody is satisfied with, why does it feel like we are the ones who are out of a job? So that's,
Which, in all practicality, as you were pointing out, even with your fourth, you potentially are out of a job if
yeah,
you are blamed for it. So
I was
I
out of a
think
job.
what you're saying is incredibly healthy. But
Oh,
what did you do when you were out of a job? What do
yeah,
authors do? I mean, you're right. Why should the author blame themselves? However, if they are taking the burden of it
yeah,
and nobody wants to publish their next book,
yeah.
what do you
So,
practically do with that? How did you bounce back?
well, I was in a fortunate position where I felt like, as I said, I was on good terms with people in the publishing industry. Like I was sort of just bitter, like sulking around my house, kicking the tires. But I decided to self-publish my next book. So I could have probably written under a pseudonym. I was too stubborn and proud to do that. Like I was like, I'm not, forget it. Like I've hit the Times bestseller list. Like I'm not giving up my career because now people don't want to touch me because, anyway, because of the reasons that we got into. So at the time, indie publishing was not really a thing except for romance, which is not what I,
When was this roughly?
2012, 2013, 2000,
Okay.
it was a while
Baby
ago.
days.
Yeah, exactly. So I should say nobody of in my category who had been, I don't mean nobody. I'm sure there are exceptions. I don't mean to say that. Very few people who had come up in traditional publishing, who wrote what I wrote, decided to then self-publish. So I
That was
decided,
bold.
well, maybe, but also like as I said, I didn't want to write under a pseudonym. I didn't want to go write in a totally different category. Like I
But it was
did.
still seen as a stigma then. So I
It
love that
was.
that not only did you say this is not necessarily my fault because the book didn't do well, but I'm going to, you took control of your career.
Well, thank you for that. That is what I did, partially because I didn't have much of a choice, or I didn't have choices that I was happy with, I should
Mhm.
say. And partially I found it sort of thrilling. Like what I wanted to do was prove that you could self-publish a book as well as a traditional publisher could. Amazon was not really a thing back then, other than people were uploading to like Create Space. And please, like, I don't need people like, don't fact check that. Like, yes, it was a thing, but it was not really, it wasn't what it was now
Right.
in terms of self-publishing. And so I just thought, like, I remember talking about it with my agent, like, you know what, somebody has to be the first one. I would rather be the first one than the second one. So, I hired again, I was in a fortunate position. I had been paid a healthy figure for my other books. I had a husband who added a second income to the family. So I don't mean to say like, this was not, this isn't what everybody has the ability to do, but I hired the designer who did my jacket covers at Random House. I hired like an editor who had been at Hyperion. I hired like a real copy editor. Like I made it as professional as possible. I did not want anybody to be able to differentiate between what Random House had put out for me. Again, love Shea Earhart, love that, like nothing but good things to say, and what I was putting out. And I succeeded in that. And the book actually sold a lot of copies. I got good reviews. We sold a lot of foreign copies. We optioned the film rights. And so that ability got me another contract back in publishing. But,
Did you want that after you had the self-publishing experience?
it's funny, and this is where you and I met at Lake Union. I actually really, and again, I have nothing but positive things to say about my time at Lake Union. I loved the autonomy of publishing my own book so much. Like every decision was mine, where I put money for advertising, for, when you are a traditional public, when you were published in the traditional space, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, so much is out of your control. That is the
Mhm.
hardest thing of this job for me. Like, you send in the manuscript and then everything else, you don't have a lot of say in. So that what I loved about the self-publishing aspect was I got to decide everything from the cover to if I hired somebody for PR to, I think I placed every single thing about it was mine and I loved it. So when it came time to taking out my next book in 20 years, I tried to convince my agent to let me do it again. And she was like, no, you have sold a lot of copies. We are setting you back up. And I'm glad that she did, because again, I had a very positive experience, but I would have kept doing it. I really enjoyed it. So there's a real freedom in it. And I understand why there are a lot of hybrid authors now.
Yeah.
You do both. So
You've been incredibly generous with your time, not only when I know
yeah,
you have
I
things, but you,
we
I know
haven't,
you, really, we do? Okay.
yeah,
I'm
like,
trying to be mindful of your
no,
time
no,
because I
no,
know you
I
have
just
another
have
interview.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have more questions.
Yeah, I
Shockingly.
here because I feel like we've been meandering. So yeah, go.
No, this is, I just love, one of the things I do talk about a lot. And one of the reasons I want to do this column is because I do want authors to see that when so much feels out of your control, you have the power to create a career you want to create by just taking ownership of it in whatever way that means to you. And you've done that in a number of ways. So you did several books with Lake Union, two, three?
Three. Yeah. Didn't we work on all of them together?
I think we did. Yes.
I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, my brain is gone, but I think we did.
And then your new one's coming out with Berkeley.
Yeah.
So this, like going to different publishers and finding different paths, I guess the question I want to ask is, you clearly see this as a career for as long as you're enjoying it, which I also love that, you're not saying you have to do this forever and grab it with your fingernails. So what do you think is the secret to being able to do that as successfully as you have, or at least with the longevity that you've had? Because I know we only have a certain amount of control over success.
I mean, there are a few things. One is, as I was saying, I really do try to put my best foot forward with the relationships that I develop at all of these houses. It is a hard job, or a hard career, I should say, and you can take things personally.
Writing,
I
you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I try to be, I don't want to say that benevolent. That's not the right word. I look at this as always a collaboration, and I try to, I don't know, be open-hearted with everybody who I'm working with, and I think that goes a long way. So when things don't go correctly, if you can still be gracious about things, and I don't mean like you're a doormat, but I do think that um, if things haven't gone well, but people still want to work with you, be in business with you, I think that's beneficial, to be sort of graceful as things go both right and wrong. I think that, again, it's hard because I'm finishing up my 10th book, and every time I finish a book, meaning this question comes at a difficult time for me. Every time I finish a book, I think I don't have another story in me. Like, I'm just done. I'm so envious of people who, I have writer friends who have like 3 or 4 ideas that they're always pulling from. That is not me. So, but at the same time, and I bet a lot of your listeners feel this way, if I haven't written in a while, I really start to feel like this itch to tell a story. And that's probably why I keep going. And there may come a point where I don't feel that itch anymore. I'm adapting with a friend of mine, Between Me and You, which you and I worked on
Saw
for
that. Congrats.
Washington's team. And it's really thrilling. Like, it's a totally different skill set, but I'm still I'm still writing and sort of using that muscle every day. And maybe I want to do that in the future. I don't know. But I think maybe it helps that I don't pin myself down. Again, with the caveat of, I've been doing this for a long time. I have a husband, I'm not We do rely on my income, but my lights are probably going to stay on. So that is, I think it's important to be clear about that. Some people don't have a choice and they have to take another contract, even if they don't want to. So, I think it's important to, to, be I don't know, transparent about that. So
Right.
I don't know what the key to longevity is. I guess maybe that I could walk away. I don't know.
That's what I keep getting from like
I don't
everything you're
know.
saying. You have this, and don't take this the wrong way, because I mean
Yeah.
it in nothing but the best way. You have this almost healthy detachment. Like, I think it's wonderful. I think as artists, it sometimes feels like that is our identity. And
Yeah.
if we fail, we are failures.
Yeah.
And you seem to have this perspective that your art is a thing you do,
Yeah.
but it's not the only thing you do. And it's not a measure of your success or worth, or, and
It's
I know we're getting into some weird territory because there is the
oh,
financial aspect. I get that.
right. I mean, to be clear, so I mean, full disclosure, my husband has been working for like starting up his own company for several years. It has just been me. And I have felt more pressure, but simultaneously, I also think, and this sort of circles back to, this is not a career for everybody in
Mhm.
terms of, even if you're a brilliant writer, you may be, and I don't mean too sensitive, like as a criticism, it is an exposed, vulnerable career. And for example, and some of this is just how I was born. And I was gonna say, for example, I see this in my daughter. She just is Teflon. Things bounce off of her. And she was born that way. And my son is not. And so I think some of this is just how I was born. And some of this is um, going through this career and learning some things about myself and how I'm willing to feel about myself for the expense of like sort of commerce. And I don't want to feel shitty about myself because things that I couldn't control, or some reader read a book of mine that they didn't like, which is their right. I read a lot of books that I don't like too. I don't write about them on Goodreads because I'm a nicer person than that. But I just think that, I think that's right. There is a little bit of a detachment and I feel better because of it. I mean, I'm nervous about this book coming out, The Rewind, but I also feel like, well, I really love it. And I hope that people love it. And my publisher seems to love it. What else can I do? Like, I just don't know what else I could do. So
This
maybe
seems so sane. It sounds so sane and peaceful. And honestly, I have gotten a lot out of this. It's been very, it's been very refreshing. It's really refreshing to hear.
thank you. Again, some of this is probably just sort of my like, I am not somebody who takes a lot of stuff personally, which I think is not necessarily true, for better or for, like, I could probably stand to take some things more personally. Yeah, like for sure. But I just think it is a hard business of exposing yourself to strangers.
Mm.
And the best thing that you can do is figure out how you're going to get from A to B without being bruised. And for me, it's, I don't read reviews after for the first couple weeks. It's been very helpful for me, as much as I haven't loved diving right back into a book. I'm writing on a faster pace because I have another book due than I usually do. I actually have not really had much time to like ruminate on this book. So maybe staying busy is a key. And, I do have kids, I have teenagers. Uh, that takes up a lot of my energy, which isn't to say you have to have a family to be busy. I just, there are other things. People have dogs, people have hobbies. And I just think having something outside of this career probably is helpful, whatever that is for people,
Mhm.
you know?
I love this. I love everything about this. Thank you. I think this is incredibly valuable and just such a, like I
Good.
said, a fresh perspective. If people want to find you, and I bet they do, how is the best way to do that?
As I said, starting out, I am on Facebook, but I'm not really on Facebook. Like, I'm there out of protest. I mean, that doesn't make any sense, but I'm just there begrudgingly. But I'm much more on Instagram, which I know is owned by Facebook. Like, you know, you got to make your deal with the devil. So I'm on Instagram at ASWin, and I'm on Twitter at ASWin. And my website, it's Allison Winn. Not that anybody goes to websites anymore, but Twitter and Instagram are probably the best way. I use them very
Wonderful.
differently. Twitter, I'm like screaming at the world, and Instagram, posting
I
pictures
love
of my
I
dogs.
love your Twitter account.
Thank
I'm
you.
always at home going, yeah.
Thank you. I mean, but you know, Instagram is like my dogs, which again, great. I know you have them as well. Great, healthy perspective of what matters in the world. So, you
And
know.
I just want to mention also to anybody watching the video that you're going to be talking about your editing and revising process in How Writers Revise, which I cannot wait because you keep saying the word collaborative. You are one of the most collaborative authors. And I love the way you, you know, I tell this story all the time that between me and you, I had editorial suggestions that you just knew were not right for the story and you stood your ground. And I
Well,
think
maybe
that's
they
a
would have
hard
been
thing
right.
to
You know
know.
what? To be honest, and this isn't just me being generous, maybe they would have been right. It just would have been a different book. But
No, I
and
think your way's better, infinitely better, actually. But I just love, it's a hard thing to know. It's one of the questions I'm asked most by authors is how do I know what editorial feedback to take and what's not right for my story? And it's not always right for your story. And you knew that. So I hope
well,
you'll talk about that.
yeah, I absolutely will. And just to say, to, you know, wrap up on that, I mean, I literally could talk to you. I'm so bummed that I have to go jump to
Me
another.
too.
Oh, because I could, maybe we'll do a part two. But on that aspect, I almost always, I really value the editorial process, as you may know. I think I've always said, like, I'm a B+ writer, and editors take my work to like the A level. I mean, you know, you have to get out of your own way at a certain point. But my feeling is 80% of an editor's notes I am open to and I take. And if there's one thing that I, you know, every once in a while I push back, but having that second set of eyes is so beneficial to the work. And so, you know, getting back to your question about longevity, I think surrounding yourself by really smart people is important. So that's how I've always looked at it. And, you know, that's what I would encourage other people to, you know, take that. Your ego is the least important thing in any of the writing process. So take that out, open up your ears to constructive criticism, and your manuscript will get better. So.
All right, from now on, I'm just going to guide everything with what would Allison do. Yeah, I really love your perspective on this. Thank you for sharing it.
Not my fault.
No, it's sane and healthy and artistic and just, I love it. It's so realistic, but also you make it yours. I think it's wonderful. Thank you.
Well, let's do more of this. And
Yes.
thank you for having me. I'm so good to see you.
Me too. Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording and then we'll say goodbye. Thanks, Allison.
Perfect. Yeah. Where am I?
I got
looking for my glasses. I was like, oh, I can't.